Welcome to this edition of Rattling the Bars. I'm your host, Mansa Musa. The death penalty in the United States of America, at one point in time, the Supreme Court had put it on hold because of the manner in which it was being given out. At that time, the way it was being given out is upon a person being found guilty of a capital offense, the judge was the ultimate determination, made the ultimate determination whether they got the death penalty or not. Throughout the course of litigation and the evolution of the legislative process, the death penalty started taking on the shape of like a jury determining whether or not a person get the death penalty or not after they were sentenced. What we have now, this day and age, and when I first heard it, it startled me to even believe that this was taking place. But in California, they have, in certain parts, the death penalty being given out. But more importantly, the death penalty was given out by the prosecutor and the courts through their systematic exclusion of people's juries of their peers. The prosecutors, and along with the courts, have systematically set up a template where they look at anybody that they think is going to be fair and impartial and have them removed from the jury. Subsequently, a lot of men and women are on death row in California. Here to talk about the abuse of this system and the discovery of the process and exposing it is Michael Collins from Color of Change. Welcome, Mike.
To be here. Thank you for having me.
Hey, tell us a little bit about yourself, and then a little bit about your organization before we unpack the issue.
I'm originally from Scotland, as you can probably tell.
Mm-hmm.
I've been in the US since like 2010, so like 15 years or so. Was in Baltimore for 10, 12 years off and on, and then I'm now in Atlanta. Color of Change, where I work, is one of the largest racial justice organizations in the country. I oversee a team that works on state and local policy issues. We do a lot of work on prosecutor accountability and criminal justice reform, which is how we became involved in this death penalty scandal.
All right, now, and right there, because when I was at a conference in Maryland, in Suitland, Maryland, one of the panelists was one of your colleagues, and the topic they was talking about was prosecutorial misconduct. And in her presentation, she talked about, and you can factor it in, correct me as I go along, and I think it's Alameda County in California.
Yep, that's where Oakland is, yeah.
Yeah, in Oakland, that they had, since 2001, the prosecutor's office had set up a system where they systematically excluded minorities, anyone, poor people, anyone that they thought that would be objective in evaluating the case. They had them excluded, therefore jury nullification and stacking the jury that resulted in numerous of people getting death penalty. Talk about this case and how it came about.
Yeah, it really was shocking when we first heard about it. We had been doing work on prosecutor accountability in Oakland, in Alameda County. And, there was a prosecutor elected, a Black woman called Pamela Price, who was elected on a platform of trying to reform the justice system and use prosecutorial discretion to kind of right the wrongs of racial injustice and do more, progressive policies within the office. And she discovered, or one of her staff discovered, that, over a period of, 3 or 4 decades, prosecutors in the office had been systematically excluding Black and Jewish people from death penalty juries. Now, in other words, how this happened was, when you go into a trial, there's a process of jury selection, and, prosecutors and defense lawyers can strike certain people from juries, right? Maybe people have seen some of this on TV. you're not allowed to, constitutionally, you are not allowed to, strike people for, race reasons, for religious reasons. But there was a sense from these prosecutors who were, very sort of tough on crime prosecutors who wanted to, they saw the death penalty as a trophy almost, right?
Hmm.
To be achieved. And they wanted to win at all costs. And so they believed that Black people and Jewish people would be less sympathetic to the death penalty, right? And more likely perhaps to find an individual not guilty, more squeamish, if you like, about, finding someone guilty who would then get the death penalty.
Right.
And so what Pamela Price, this district attorney, discovered was a series of like notes and papers that kind of documented, the ways in which they were individual prosecutors were excluding people from juries in this way and really giving people like an unfair trial. And California has for a number of years now had a moratorium on the death penalty. They've essentially hit the pause button on the death penalty. But for a number of years, it was really a state that carried out the death penalty.
Yeah, you're right.
Um, and also, the one of the more startling things about this is, Pamela Price, she came in, she discovered these notes. I think our reaction was, this is crazy. How does this happen? It actually turns out that somebody sort of raised the alarm bell about this as far back as 2004.
Mm.
The prosecutor in the Oakland office who kind of came out and he was like, listen, I was leading the trainings on this. Like I was somebody who was part of making these policies. And, uh, the admission went before judges, it went before courts of appeals, and they kind of threw it out. They didn't believe this guy, and they kind of hounded this guy, who was
Mm.
the death penalty prosecutor, who essentially had a change of heart, and they hounded him out of town. And he now lives in Montana and practices law. And I think he probably feels a sense of like vindication about this, but
Hmm.
it's very troubling for us, the cover up that's gone on and the number of people that are implicated. So far, we know of at least 35 cases of individuals, but the DA is investigating this. It's probably going to be more than 35 cases,
Right.
right? It probably extends beyond the death penalty, to be honest. It
Right.
probably extends to other cases, I would say serious crime cases where, as I say, prosecutors wanted to win at all costs and put anything, use any tactic to get a guilty verdict, including, essentially tampering with the jury. And we're in a position now where I think what we want is some level of accountability.
Right.
Obviously, we want these individuals who have been sentenced to be, exonerated. They were given an unfair trial. That's abundantly clear. But
Yeah.
the judges and the prosecutors who were involved in this scandal, who stole lives, right, and who, essentially put people on a path to the death penalty, right? What is the accountability for them? And so that's something that Color of Change is really pushing.
All right. So talk about the because now you're saying like over 3 decades, and in that and how long has the moratorium been on?
It's since the current governor took office. So I think it's 4 or 5 years.
Okay, so 4 or 5 years. So prior
Yeah.
to that, they was executing people.
Yes.
All right. So how many people, if y'all have this information, how many people had been executed that was in that that was in that period, that
As a
three
result of this,
decade period?
we don't have the numbers on that. I think what we're looking at just now is 35 cases where they've
Right.
identified that are people who are now serving life sentences as a result of the moratorium. Because when the governor said we're not doing the death penalty anymore and kind of hit the pause button on the death penalty, and again, I'll stress that it is a pause button, right? A new
Yeah.
governor,
Right. Right.
a new person could take office. It's not like it's been eliminated, but
Right.
we kind of hit the pause button on the death penalty, there were a number of people who had their death penalty convictions converted into life sentences. And that was kind of how part of this process, was uncovered, because Pamela Price, this district attorney, her office was kind of working on, what kind of sentence they were working with a judge to try and like figure out some sort of solution to these cases where people were having their cases converted to like another sentence, like perhaps a life sentence, life without parole, something like that. And in the process of kind of working with a federal judge, that's when they discovered these, these notes and these files.
Right, right.
At
Let
the
me ask you this here.
Yeah,
Okay, so in I know like in the state of Maryland where I served my time at, and I'm in the District of Columbia now.
right.
The sentencing mechanism, as I opened up, was the case came out, Furman Act versus the United States. That's the case that Furman versus the United States. That's the case that they used to like change the way the death penalty was being given out back in the 70s. Because during that time, Angela Davis had just got arrested. So it was a campaign out in California to abolish the death penalty. But what wound up happening is they had a series of a series of case litigation saying violate the Eighth Amendment. So what ultimately happened was that the Supreme Court ruled that the way the death penalty was being given out, which was the judge was the sole person that was gave out, they changed it to now they had allowed for like after the person was found guilty, then the jury would determine whether or not they got the death penalty. That was based on the person that's being looked at for the death penalty will have the opportunity to allocute why he shouldn't be given. But how was the system set up in California? Is a person found guilty and then given the death penalty, or is a person found guilty and then they have a sentencing phase? How is the system in California?
Yeah, I think the person's found guilty and then there's like a sentencing phase. And, there were a lot of articles about this and about the different lawyers in the California. I mean, I think there's obviously, a movement to end the death penalty, and it's gathered a lot of momentum in the last like 5 or 10 years. But I think if you go back to like the 80s and the 90s, especially, this era, whether it was you were in Maryland or whether you were in California, whether in Kentucky, just across the country, this very like tough on crime era and harsh sentences. And, I think that the death penalty for prosecutors, or what we've been told and what we've read, the death penalty cases were almost like a prize for the prosecutors, right? They
Yeah.
do the cases. It was the most complex cases. It had the most prestige attached to it. And, they were really sort of valued on their ability to win these cases. And so, they would send, their best prosecutors to do these cases. They would, ask for the death penalty frequently. And that's why we have a situation where, at the very least, we know, like in a place like Oakland, which is not a huge place, we have like 35 cases right now that they're looking at. One of the cases has already been overturned. The conviction has been quashed of an individual. We expect that to happen in a lot of these cases as they kind of examine the evidence,
Right.
like how much the death penalty was. The jury selection was a key factor in the conviction. But yeah, I mean, it certainly was the case that the death penalty was used very frequently in California.
Okay, so in terms of the reason why I asked that question, I'm trying for the purpose of educating our audience to see if at what juncture was the exclusion taking place, or was it across the board? Because
Oh yeah, so my understanding is the exclusion took place as they were selecting the jury, right? You start off with a pool, maybe some of your audience have been selected for like jury duty when you go in and you're sitting in a room and there's maybe like 100 people, and then eventually they whittle it down to 12 people and some alternates. And in that process, you're sort of, as a prosecutor and as a defense lawyer, you're striking people from the jury, right? And saying like, man, I don't want this person. the reasons for doing that are supposed to be sort of ethical and constitutional. Like, what do you think of you'll be asked, like, what do you think of the police? What do you think of law enforcement?
Mm-hmm.
You trust the judicial process. They're trying to figure out, you know, are you going to be able to properly serve on this jury? Are you tainted in some way? But, the notes were really about, a feeling that Black people were not sympathetic to the death penalty. They're
Right.
not convict, or Jewish people because of their beliefs, because of their religion, were also not sympathetic to the death penalty. And so the prosecutors were trained and instructed to make sure if they found out a person was if they had a Jewish last name or something like that, or if a person was Black, ask some questions, figure it out, but essentially get them off the jury. And there was even a case, I mentioned before, we're talking a lot about prosecutors. Judges were involved in this as well.
Right. Right.
There was a case where, a judge pulled the prosecutor after jury selection into his chambers and said, "You have a Jewish person on the jury. What are you doing? Get that person off the jury."
Oh my goodness.
And so the sort of depths of the scandal are beyond kind of prosecute. It's a real institutional crisis. And that's why we want the governor to get involved, Governor Newsom,
Right.
get involved and provide resources to investigate this. We want the Attorney General to get involved and investigate this because, this is a very clear and obvious scandal. And it's not enough to, in our opinion, resentence these individuals,
Right.
exonerate them. Other people did some very, very shady things and very unethical things and illegal things and ruined people's lives. And, as far as they were concerned, these people were going to be killed. And so we want to make sure that there's, accountability for that. They treated this like it was a sport, like it was a competition, and people's lives have been ruined as a result. And we want to make sure that people are held accountable for what they did.
Talk about so talk about this prosecutor, the one that came in with this reform. Was this something she campaigned on and then carried it out? What's your background? What's your information on her?
Yeah, it's a good question. So Colour of Change has worked a lot on trying to, reshape the way that prosecutors operate, right? I mean, historically, prosecutors, they are the most powerful player in the system, right? They will, decide how much bail you get, how long you're going to be on probation. Everybody likes to sort of imagine trials like judge, jury, and,
Right.
like most cases are a guilty plea that are executed by the prosecutor themselves. So they have tremendous power. And very often, as we've seen with this scandal, prosecutors are just kind of old school, tough on crime. I'm going to get the heaviest sentence.
Yeah.
This guy away for as long as possible. That was kind of like their vision of justice. And Colour of Change, along with another number of other organizations, wanted to elect prosecutors that were more justice oriented, that were more reform minded, that were people who, had a different view of the justice system and wanted to use some of that tremendous power within the prosecutor's office to to do good, to do justice, to reform them. And so around about sort of 2016, 2017, you saw a lot of prosecutors get elected that were more interested in things like police accountability.
Right.
Marilyn Mosby in Baltimore, Kim Fox in Chicago. There was also Larry Krasner in Philadelphia.
Right.
And they came in and they did things like exonerations, right? They would investigate previous cases where the office itself had convicted somebody and they would, find wrongdoing and then they would like overturn that verdict and the person would go free. They did things like non-prosecution of low-level offences or diversion, stuff like that. Anyway, Pamela Price kind of came in as the Oakland DA, a historically Black jurisdiction. She herself had a civil rights background, was not a prosecutor, and kind of took office to really trying to kind of reshape the office after like decades of having like a tough on crime prosecutor, mostly sort of white-led office that was
Mm-hmm.
locking up black people and kind of throwing away the key. And she came in with a lot more of like a nuanced, nuanced approach. And I think like she didn't campaign necessarily on this scandal, but I think it's true to say that a lot of other prosecutors, the traditional sort of tough on crime prosecutors, would have like discovered these files and been like, just put that back, forget.
Right, right.
Because, you're opening like a hornet's nest here.
Mm-hmm.
Because you think about there's victims involved, there's family members, there's cases, there's some of these cases are sort of 20, 30 years old, right? It's not easy what, the office is going to have to go through to reinvestigate these things.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I think like there's like this crop of prosecutors that has like a different, vision of justice and what justice is, and they do want to hold people accountable for wrongdoing, whether it is, somebody who commits a homicide or a prosecutor who commits misconduct or a police killing, they apply that kind of one standard of justice. And so she was very open and sort of found these files and then approached a federal judge and said to the judge, look, here's all this evidence that there was this sort of systemic racism, anti-Semitism,
Mm.
that resulted in people getting the death penalty. And the federal judge was the one who said, okay, you need to review all these cases, right? You need to, move
Yeah,
forward with a full
yeah.
review. And so that's what's happening right now. So that's kind of like Pamela Price's story. Incidentally, she's actually being recalled in California.
Oh yeah, yeah. Larry Craver. He was like in Philadelphia. The same thing we have with
Yeah, it's
him.
the same thing. There's a big
Kim
backlash
Fields. Yeah, same thing we have with him.
prosecutors and this sort of like,
Yeah.
and it's hard because if she is recalled in November, I don't really know what's going to happen to these
Oh,
cases.
I know. You know what's gonna happen. They gonna go to the defendants, and they're gonna like sweep it up under the rug. But talk
Yeah, I
about
mean
the
that.
community. Talk
Yeah,
about the community, because that's what that lead me right into this. Because of what you say about her, right, and the prospect that she might be recalled. Talk about y'all organizational work and educating and mobilizing the community, because that ultimately, if the community is engaged in the process, because it's their family members that's being like Oakland. Oakland is the birth of the Black Panther Party.
yeah,
Oakland has a enriched history
yeah.
of civil disobedience. So if police brutality, it go the list go on and on. If the community, where y'all at in terms of organizing or mobilizing or having some kind of coalition around
Yeah, we have a
this?
coalition on prosecutor accountability where we try and, we're not sort of prosecutors are part of a very broken system, right? We don't want to be cheerleaders for these prosecutors. We talk more about accountability, so prosecutor
Right.
accountability. So we have a coalition that we're members of with, Ella Baker Centre and ACLU and a number of other local groups where we, meet regularly with the DA, but we try and push her to embrace more progressive policies. We try and push her to move more quickly on some
Mm-hmm.
death penalty cases. But at the same time, if she's doing the right thing, like she's doing on these death penalty cases, we're certainly going to defend her and go out there and support what she's doing.
Right. 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 Right.
So we do
Because
like
yeah. Right.
we do community events. We do. I'm actually in New Orleans just now, where we're holding, an event with around about 100 folks from across the country from different groups to talk about like how do you, including people from Oakland, to talk about how can you push your prosecutor and what should you do about it. But as it's a very tough time for criminal justice reform, right? We're in
That's right. That's right.
of this backlash, right? Where, coming out of the killing of George Floyd, there was actually a lot of mobilization of people on the streets calling for reform. And very quickly that's disappeared. And we've been, attacked relentlessly. Anybody who engages in reform, police accountability, they want the establishment wants rid of them, the conservatives. And to be honest, like, especially in a place like California, what we see is a lot of kind of centrist Democrats kind of running scared,
Oh yeah. 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 Yeah.
kind of using the same talking points as like Donald Trump on crime. And
Yeah.
that's just like very unfortunate. So it is an uphill struggle because there's so much misinformation out there about crime and about, prosecutors and about progressive policies and But we're trying to kind of educate people. And when you see something like this happen, we try and tell people, look, other prosecutors would look the other way, and that certainly is what happened. As I mentioned before, this scandal goes back
Yeah,
decades
that's crazy.
about it, and this woman is in office, and she has had
Exposed, yeah.
something
And
about.
but the thing about the thing that to highlight your point about reform, and how we had like the upper hand in terms of George Floyd, but George Jackson said that if he was the best described fashion, he was described as reform. All the call for police accountability and divest, all those the fascists and capitalists, they took them conversations and they twisted.
Yeah.
And they twisted to the form like Cop City, where we saying like, well, we doing this and the bill to create the reform that you talking about. So we want to better educate and better train, but you train them to be paramilitary. And the same thing with like what's going on right now in terms of like any type of social justice movement around prosecutor misconduct and what they call progressive prosecutors. I work with I interned with an organization that's what they did. They got prosecutors, they educated them, got them involved in becoming progressive prosecutors, but all the progressive prosecutors that's doing what they was mandated to do, to find the truth for justice, search for the truth and justice, all of them are being recalled, targeted, and organizations like yourself. Talk about where y'all at now in terms of y'all next strategy around this issue.
So we are having conversations with the Attorney General's office, because the Attorney General plays this role where, they themselves can identify that misconduct has happened, the unconstitutional jury instructions, and they can make a ruling, and they have like more resources and more authority
Right.
than the local DA. So we met like 2 weeks ago, I think, with the Attorney General's office to try and push them to get more involved. We're pushing the governor to dedicate more resources and get more involved in this, as somebody who himself opposes the death penalty.
Mm-hmm.
So, and we're trying to keep the drumbeat going in terms of attention. Good organizations like you guys really appreciate you reaching out to us on this, because it is so important that more people know about this. It's just like, I'm always like surprised that it isn't like a bigger story. Like when I found out about this, I was like, oh, this is gonna be front page, like
Right. Should be.
It's so crazy.
Yeah.
But like, I guess there's so much going on just now, or I don't know. You never can tell what's going on.
But
Yeah.
like in terms of how can our viewers and listeners get in touch with you, and how they, and tell them how if they want to support y'all efforts, what they can do to
So
support y'all.
Color of Change has a website called Winning Justice, which is our prosecutor accountability work. And if you go on there, you'll see, a number of actions that people can take around this death penalty scandal, even with their own local prosecutors trying to get involved, set up coalitions, actions that can be taken where you can push your own prosecutor, whether they're progressive or not, to to do more justice and engage in more. So it's Winning Justice is our website, and if you search for it, you'll find it, and you'll see a ton of actions and just kind of like our positions on a bunch of different issues and what we try and do with prosecutors to get them to engage more in reform.
Well, thank you, Mike. There you have it, the real news Rattling the Bars. It might be strange. It really might be a stretch of your imagination to believe that elected officials would actually say that if you're black and you're Jewish, that you don't have a right to serve on the jury because you might be sympathetic to the defendant, be it the death penalty, be it the defendant's economic and social conditions, but because they think that you might be sympathetic to that real is saying like, well, you might just be objective to see that it's a set of circumstances that contributed to the outcome of the charge. But no, as opposed to do that and search for the truth, what I do as a prosecutor, I put a playbook together and say, these people under all circumstances cannot serve on a jury, and do it for over 3 decades, not knowing how many people has been executed as a result of this malicious behavior, but yet ain't nobody being charged, Ain't nobody being indicted. Ain't nobody being fired. They're being awarded a Medal of Honor for this dishonorable act. We ask that you look into this matter and make a determination. Do you want your tax dollars to support this type of behavior? We ask that you look into this matter and check out what the color change has to offer in terms of their advocacy and see if it's something that you might want to get involved with. Thanks, Mike. Thank you for coming on.
Appreciate it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much for watching the Real News Network, where we lift up the voices, stories, and struggles that you care about most. And we need your help to keep doing this work. So please tap your screen now, subscribe, and donate to the Real News Network. Solidarity forever.